just an amazing testament, once again, to me. This is something that I will always cherish as a former professional athlete, Basinonians, to be able to go out and compete and do it over and over and over again and never change how you compete. In other words, never quit. My young Crunk brothers, it was on display last night for all of us to see why you never quit. You look at the Suns right there. It was, 8 minutes? They had just over 8 minutes to go. They were down 22 points in the fourth quarter against the Sacramento Kings, a good basketball team who looked like, frankly, the better basketball team all game long. If you watch that game, they looked like they were just toying with the Phoenix Suns, right? Every time the Suns would come back and cut the lead to 10 or 12 or 13, somewhere like that, all of a sudden they'd put the plow down and hit the gas, and it was back up to 20. They looked like they were toying with the Suns. I guarantee you there wasn't a player on the Suns bench who believed they were going to win that game, but it didn't change their effort. It never changed their approach. They never said uncle. They never quit. And because of that, Luke, they came back and won the game.
You know, I like to think there's somebody right now that's just kind of jumping in their car and they were watching the game last night, but they turned it off. You know, I had to get to bed for work or whatever. And so they didn't see the second half of the fourth quarter. And as you're talking right now, they're like, what is he talking about? The Suns lost. Go ahead and look. The Suns didn't lose. In fact, the stat of the game, and we have this in a story on Arizona Sports, Tim Reynolds tweeted it out. It's the biggest fourth quarter comeback in the NBA since the bubble. And teams facing deficits of 22 or more in the fourth quarter were 1,244 since August 23rd of 2020.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's why it's the greatest example, once again, of never quitting. My young Crunks, don't ever quit. Compete to the bitter end. It says so much about who you are as a person to say, I'm never going to stop. I don't care what the score is. I don't care what the quarter is. I don't care what I don't care what math says about us coming back. I'm going to never change my approach. Man, if you take that mentality right there, you're going to win. You're going to win a lot of games. And I'm not talking about collectively, but I'm talking about individually.
They just snapped a 1,244 game losing streak. It wasn't there.
Do you believe
it was a collective losing. They snapped that losing streak.
Where did you find that, Luke?
It's on Arizona Sports. It's somebody else. It's Tim Reynolds' tweet, but it's in Kellen's story on Arizona Sports.
Man, that is nails.
I did see it last night too, and I was like, I mean, look, I rewatched the fourth quarter this morning. Just because it was that good. And, you know, obviously I knew we were going to talk about it, so I wanted to really be able to recall everything in depth. And I'm just kind of, you know, taking notes as it's going. Okay, yeah, this is where it turned. Oh, no, wait, it actually gets worse. Okay, this is where it turned. No, it actually gets worse. There were 3 or 4 times in the fourth quarter, I'm like, okay, this is where they started to turn around. No, they didn't, actually. It kept getting worse and worse in the fourth quarter. And then they went on just an absurd run. 23-4 run to close out the final 5 minutes on the clock. And, you know, Kellen points this out in his story, too. I almost didn't even realize it watching it the first time. There's really no stoppage from about 4:39 on. The game's just going. There's not like, hey, we're going to stop and TV timeout. Oh, okay, well, here's a timeout here. Or, okay, well, so-and-so's calling a timeout. Oh, somebody rolled their ankle. It just goes, man. It just, in real time, they just peel off basically the last 4 minutes of that game, and the Suns go on a crazy run, and they needed this game. They don't have a game like this season where they're on this end. They're on the right end of a comeback in the fourth quarter. Not like this. I mean, heck, that stat right there shows nobody's been on the right end of a comeback like this in 4 years.
Yeah, you know, once again, it just, as a guy that played professionally in a team sport, this was an incredible team win to come back from being down all game. You know, it wasn't just the 22 points in the fourth quarter. They were down all game, man. It showed incredible toughness, uncommon talent, and collective soul, man. And they did it all in the fourth quarter. Wouldn't it figure, Basinonians, that it was the fourth quarter all over again? How many times have we seen the Suns fail in the fourth quarter, especially on the defensive end of the floor? Well, it was not to be last night. The very quarter that has been their albatross somehow, some way, suddenly became their passepartout, the key that unlocks all locks. It's right there in front of them. They have to now try to replicate what they were doing and do it again and again and again.
Here is Kevin Durant after the game. He talked about the key to the comeback.
I think once we went small and was able to switch all the actions, they're a team that likes to, play a free-flowing movement offense. So when you could disrupt that, they turn into a whole different team. So we pressured Sabonis a little bit more. We switched some of these screens and made them play one-on-one and made them, turn into they're not a selfish team, but when you're switching everything, it just makes you play ISO game, So I think we did a good job of forcing them into that. But it's still incredible, man. I really give a lot of credit to the end of the third unit, who just kind of changed momentum for us and got us within like 14 or 12 or something like that, I think, with Book and Mezzi, and I forget who else was in that lineup, but I think that one is what kind of helped turn the game for us. Even though we still got down 17 in the fourth, I feel like we seen something with that group that'll help us, for the rest of the game. And I think that momentum kind of led us into the fourth.
KD had a quote after the game. Somebody asked him how they came back, and he said, quote, "I have no clue. I usually know how the game is flowing, but it felt like this was a blur." Unquote. Yeah, it was. It was a blur, KD. Watching it was a blur. I can only imagine what it was like being in it, because it's usually more of a blur when you're involved.
They got stops. Suddenly they got stops. And it started with 1, and then it went to 2, and then 4, and then they continued to be able to lock it down in the last 8 minutes of the fourth quarter. You gotta be kidding. It's because they never quit again. They got stops on the defensive end of the floor. They moved the ball incredibly well. They used their momentum, and it must be said, KD went off.
15 points in the fourth quarter alone.
KD went off.
Played defense.
And they won a game they should have no way in the world won. Now, what does it do?
Well, we're going to get into that, obviously, a lot throughout the show. But, I think it's at least worth referencing back to that Lakers game. This game, very different. I would say in a lot of ways, this game even more encouraging, also kind of discouraging, because they were way down in the fourth quarter. But the reason I would say it may be a little more encouraging is just because they don't have a game like this yet. But you go back to that Lakers game, and I remember us talking going into the game. They had lost 3 of 4, but it was like, your team's mostly healthy now. This is your first game against the Lakers this year with the big 3. If you can win this game tonight, you were 0-3 against the Lakers, maybe this can start to be a turning point. I know it's only 3 games, but counting that Lakers game, they're 3-0 in their last 3 games. And, the one last night, they didn't have a game like that this year, Wolf, where the Suns just took over the second half of a fourth quarter. It has been the opposite most of the year, if anything.
Thanks for watching Wolf and Luke. Tap to see more and click the button in the middle to subscribe to Arizona Sports.